How many of you are getting sick of talking about Apple Silicon? None of you? Oh, okay. It's just, for me at least, there's only so many ways to say it's better than before. It's so much faster, it's so much more power efficient, and yeah, these are all good things that we can appreciate, but today's video is talking about things we can look forward to in the MacBook lineup outside of just faster CPU and GPU speeds, because those are great and helpful, but what else does Apple have in store other than just kicking Intel out of the house? Let's begin. Right, so first off, Inch Macbook is dropping some new information on us saying that there's going to be two new redesigned MacBook Pros next year. I'm assuming this means the smaller version and the larger version. We've gone back and forth for ages about whether or not it'll be 13 inches or 14 inches. I'm really hoping for 14 inches because the 13-inch display is just a little bit too small for me, and personally, even on the MacBook Air, I feel like the bezels are just a bit too thick, especially when you compare them to something like the iPad Pro. And for the sake of avoiding product redundancy, I would love it if the MacBooks can kind of move away from the sizes that the iPad Pros are currently sitting in. So if the iPad Pros stay below 13 inches, but the MacBooks stay above 14 inches, I think there's a good barrier there to separate macOS and iPadOS. However, of course, these redesigns we don't know a whole lot about, but what we do know is they'll be rocking mini LED displays, which, in case you're wondering what that means, basically allowing for a lot of OLED-type benefits without a lot of the drawbacks. So that includes deeper blacks, a more brighter display, and more color accurate display. So a lot of the technology they incorporated into the super extremely fairly priced Pro Display XDR, they want to start bringing to the MacBook lineup, and hopefully, this is a big hope here, that does not come along with a price increase. I'd be really annoyed if, you know, Apple Silicon came along, allowed Apple to save some money, and they were like, cool, now it's a lot cheaper to manufacture a MacBook, and all of us consumers are just like, yay, that means cheaper Macs, right? And Apple goes, no, that means we're gonna blow some money on some XDR crap, and now MacBooks get more expensive anyway, but you can't even complain about it because people will be like, yeah, but the displays are so much better now. They're as good as reference monitors that are $40,000, so you're really saving money in that sense. I hate that argument so much. It's like, the companies that are willing to spend $40,000 on reference monitors, can't they just keep doing that? Did Apple have to save those businesses, you know, $30,000, or could Apple just make something for the rest of us, like a standalone monitor that's below $2,000 or something like that? I don't know. Either way though, hopefully mini LED is not too expensive, and of course it's coming to the 16-inch MacBook Pro as well, which in my opinion sounds like a complete no compromises package. I mean, I'm sure you're going to be getting the top of the line Apple Silicon, you're going to be getting a hopefully reliable keyboard, some great speakers, an awesome display, and probably incredibly good battery life with those high efficiency cores in the M series of chips. If you're able to stretch like 20 hours of battery life out of the 13-inch MacBook Pro, imagine how the 16-inch MacBook Pro could do with its, you know, barely legal sized battery pack. That's something I very much look forward to seeing, and you could probably even start to hit the 30-hour mark when it comes to video playback. You know, the second you open Final Cut, your battery's still gonna drop to 30 minutes, but for the light background tasks and all that kind of thing, it looks very exciting. And Quo also gave us some good and bad news. The bad news is this next MacBook I'm about to talk about is not coming until 2022, but he says Apple is working on developing a more affordable version of the MacBook Air. Quo does not have a flawless track record, so I wouldn't believe everything he says, but I do find it very exciting to know that even at $1,000, Apple is at least considering making a version of the MacBook that could go cheaper. If they could start getting the entry level to the MacBook lineup closer to $900 or $800, maybe this is the MacBook SE so many people have always wanted, so perhaps a slightly more dated design but still up-to-date silicon, and perhaps mini LED will start to make the old-fashioned MacBook Air look not so interesting, but they can continue to update the silicon inside it so it's still impressive and has great performance and battery life, but it's a bit more affordable. And if we're starting to price Macs below the $1,000 price market, and that's like with tax, so I'm not counting education discounts and that kind of thing, sounds like Apple has some big plans for the Mac, and it's not just intended intending on killing it off with iPads in the future. Some of you may still think that's happening, which is fine. But last little Easter egg of interesting news is a patent filing, which, if you guys know me, you know I'm not a big fan of covering patent filings because I have done it in the past and they're almost always wrong. In fact, probably 80 to 90% of the patents we see Apple get granted, they usually don't end up utilizing. So if you see Apple file a patent for something, it almost guarantees it's not going to happen. But the patent they were filing for was to look at light absorbing techniques on next generation MacBooks that would allow for some impossibly black color finishes that would actually use some more anodized material that could paint a MacBook external a darker black than even what we can achieve with typical matte black devices. And I knew the second I read that Marquez would be all over it. And yep, sure enough, Marquez is all over it. I would be all over it too, because just the complexities in the wording of the patent are fascinating to see how much work Apple will put into just the color of something, and yet they still made something as ugly as the red iPhone 12. But either way, this is one of those small patents where I'm like, ooh, man, I really want that to be a thing, because if the next generation of MacBooks have this new redesigned look, maybe they're more rounded off, and maybe because they don't have to design as much for acquiring fans, they can be a bit more creative with the next generation MacBook Pro designs, and maybe alongside that, with the mini LED adoption and everything, we can see some like super duper matte black MacBook Pros. And again, it's not likely to happen because most of these patents don't, but either way, something to be somewhat excited for. I'm kind of getting tired of the old silver, space gray, everything's kind of the same these days. So something new and aesthetically very pleasing I would be very much into. What other things would you guys like to see brought to the MacBook line, aside from just better Apple Silicon? We know that one. Personally, for me, I would love to see an LTE option or Face ID come to the MacBook lineup in the next few years, because you know, even that cheaper entry-level MacBook Air in 2022 is going to have a garbage potato quality webcam, because that's just a law of the universe now. It's illegal to put a better webcam in a laptop. So Face ID perhaps could help with that, and iPads have cellular, so why not Macs? You know, they have bigger batteries anyway. All that good stuff. Let me know what you're thinking. This is your Apple Sheep here. I'll see you guys in the next one.